and I'm really excited to have this next gentleman on. His name is David Amerland, and he is an expert in search engine optimization, specifically with respect to Google. And he is, in my opinion, one of the world's expert in this field. So I am just thrilled to have him on here. I can't thank him enough for him giving me us his time to come on and speak about all this awesome stuff that you're going to hear about in the next hour or so. So please turn off your cell phone, get a notebook and a pen and paper, and take really good notes, because this guy's going to give you some great information. It's going to be extremely helpful because search engine optimization, as we all know, it's a very complicated thing. So to have someone who's really got their finger on the pulse of it and bring them on here for them to share their knowledge and their wisdom and expertise with us is just extremely valuable, to say the least. So how's it going, David?
Chris, it's going well, and I'm actually delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I think it's critical to sort of get these discussions going and sort of tackle a fairly complex subject and try to unravel it a little bit for the audience. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh yes, that's awesome, David. All right, so David, could you tell our audience right now? Oh, you know what? I mean, I can't believe I forgot one of the most important things is just really quickly, I want to throw this in there. I reached out to David because I have his book. It's Google Semantic Search, and a fantastic book. So I just reached out to him, and I had to have him come on here. And David, if you will, could you go into the current state of affairs of where we are today with Google search? And I know that Google, I've tried to kind of do some homework on this myself, and studying it is really like a full-time job in itself, because it seems like every year or so Google is always playing this cat and mouse game with people. Like, there's people that they try to hack the algorithms, and they try to cheat and take shortcuts, and they try to stuff their websites with keywords, and they try to really do these black hat so-called type of techniques to try to get their website to page 1 of Google. Google catches on to it, so ultimately they come out with all these penalties, and which are, I believe, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong down the road, but you know, the panda update and the penguin update and the hummingbird. So it seems like every year they're always trying to keep people mystified with what really a person needs to do to try to get a website to on that coveted first page of Google, where pretty much that's where, if anyone wants to know anything or if they want something, they're going to click on that first page, most likely the first couple of links that are there. So everybody and their brother is really trying to strive for the goose that laid the golden egg with, how do I get my website to that first page of Google? And then Google is trying to regulate, appropriately on their end to try to keep everything clean and ethical and honest. That way their primary customer is pretty much people searching for using their website, so they want to make sure that they deliver good information to the world. So if you could maybe just give some insight as to where we are exactly with the current state of affairs of Google search, and what a person really needs to do for themselves to try to get more traffic to their website, to try to amplify their online presence.
Okay, yeah, certainly, and I loved your introduction here, because essentially you created a very granular picture of search before semantic search kicked in. So let's look at this a little bit. Search used to work, I mean, you mentioned the first page of Google, and you're quite right. The first page of Google used to be a bottleneck in many ways, because there are only 10 places there. Everybody used to vie for the one of those 10 places, and really one of the first 5, because the first 5 is to get something like 75% of the traffic, and the next 5 is to vie for the 25% of the traffic. Anybody who's on the second or third page, well, you may as well not be there, because people's attention is so short, and they, if they don't see what they see very quickly, then they just move away and do another search. It was a very lossy proposition, as you probably imagine, because search, because it is driven by mathematics, it can be reverse engineered. A little bit of it, part of it can be understood, and human behavior, human economic behavior being what it is, we always look for the next shortcut, something which will give us a greater return for our effort, and that effort has to be as little as possible. And that's where a lot of the gaming activities of the past came in. We used to game search within a gray zone. I'm not going to call it legitimate practices, but certainly acceptable practices, which became unacceptable as they increased. And then Google would come in, apply a filter, change that, and that led us to the cat and mouse game, which you mentioned in the beginning. And things are different. They've changed, and they've changed radically. So let's see why they have changed first before we see how. They've changed essentially because the web is growing at an exponential rate. The first page of Google no longer adequately could reflect the 10 best answers to anything. Certainly the way it operated was not the best way of operating because it carried out a statistical lexical analysis of content on a web page, which then gave us a probabilistic approach on the first page of Google. And then we, as the searcher, would have to go through and try to find the best possible answer to our query. And it's not the best way of moving forward as the web basically increases. For the last 10 years, Google has been experimenting with aspects of semantic search, waiting for technology to catch up to the research, and now we are at a stage where it can actually be implemented, and it has since 2012. We're in a semantic search universe. We're calling it semantic search, but essentially it's search, right? It's just changed. How has it changed? Well, it's changed in the way it understands what we say when we type a search query on a search engine, and it also has changed in the way it understands the information it indexes. And it's changed in two different ways. First of all, it understands language the way we understand it as people, which means it understands the words specifically, and then it understands the intent behind the words. And that's where the magic really happens, because in order for that to happen, it mines a lot of information from our own profile. It begins over time to form a fairly clear idea of who we are, and then it understands the queries we put on the web in terms of the intent which we have. And if it understands the intent behind the search query so much better, then it has to give us a better kind of information, a better kind of answer on search itself, which means that the first page of Google, which used to be a bottleneck, has disappeared. So essentially the first page of Google is pretty much unique for everybody. And if you're on your phone, it is definitely unique to you. If you're on your desktop, it is fairly unique to you, because there's certain things on desktop search which are fairly universal. So this has taken care of the fight for the first page of Google, because essentially if what you do is the answer to a particular search query, we can all be on the search page of Google now. There are no longer just 10 places. That, of course, sort of shows how we have moved to the new space. And the new space is frightening and scary, because suddenly all the tricks and tips of the past, of those little things which we used to think are the optimizing aspects of search, are no longer quite as valid. And this is quite scary because nothing seems to work as well. Now, what do we do from here? How do we actually move forward? Well, essentially, if search works in a way that understands better what the person asking the question really wants to do, and if it also works better in terms of understanding the information it indexes, then really the way moving forward is fairly simple. We really need to work very hard at clarifying essentially what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And if all this sounds a little bit like establishing our identity, establishing our uniqueness on the web, well, it's because it is. You know, in the offline world, we do this automatically because we're used to it, and ultimately we have no choice. You know, you don't choose to be in the physical world, you're there. The moment you're there, really, you can only be you. You can't be anybody else because everybody else is taken. And you develop with time and experience your own unique style. The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you do business, the way you network, the way you decide what career to follow, all those things become part of your identity. And they mark you off as a unique individual. And depending on the success, the degree of the combination that you put all those things together, you become successful in what you do, or perhaps not. Exactly the same rationale now goes on the web. And there are relatively complex things which we'll hopefully cover in a more accessible way on what you need to do in order to establish those things. But essentially, this is where we're at now. So when you get on the web and you carry out a search, the success of whether you're going to find what you want, or the success of whether your business or your website is going to show up on search, depends very much on your ability to establish who you are, what you do, why you do it, in a very coherent, logical way.
All right. Yeah, that was an excellent uh, uh, insight, if you will, into Google, because Google is quite mysterious. So that was a great start to, as far as kind of clearing much of this up. So David, if someone has a website, let's just say a real estate agent, for example, if they have a website and they're trying to capture someone that is looking to buy a house, or they're looking to capture someone that's looking to sell their house. So the people that are looking to sell their house, they want to know how much their house is worth before they move forward in trying to sell it. And someone that's trying to buy a house, they are researching, schools in the area. They want to know about the crime rate, is it safe, the community, things that are going to be relevant for their children. And oftentimes, maybe they'll use specific keywords. It'll be something like homes for sale, and then they'll put the zip code in there. So like my zip code is 06062. Actually, some customer just told me this recently, so I always try to tap into the mind of what buyers and sellers are kind of looking for, with what keywords they use, which is important. So it'll be homes for sale plus 06062, and then a lot of times, they would go to Zillow or Trulia or what have you. But so David, if someone has a website, what are the first few steps that a person can go and take so they're going to implement themselves, and they're going to try to optimize their website that may have been given to them, or maybe they just got it from GoDaddy. Sometimes you get these website builders where you can subscribe and you can just design it all yourself. Let's just say, or maybe even if they have a WordPress blog, or if it's just some web page that they want to optimize to try to get more traffic to it, what would you say the first few important steps are for a person that wants to try to get, for the purpose of this conversation, a real estate agent, they're trying to get more potential customers to their website?
Okay, this is a tricky question because essentially it has two answers, and it has two answers because it depends on who is asking it. I do the same thing that we're doing now at a higher level with corporate executives and multinational corporations, and they ask me the same question about their websites. And the answer to that one usually is a session I have with their search management team, which takes up to between 3 and 4 hours, and we cover essentially all the little steps that they need to do in order to make sure their website works the way it should. And usually they have a lot of manpower and deeper pockets, and they can actually throw all those resources at it. And now you're asking the same question for a person who's perhaps working on their own or working with a very small team where resources of time and money are not plentiful, and they face the same problem. And the answer is going to be decidedly different, but the essentials of it are going to be the same, because what I do at a larger scale works also at a smaller scale. The reason they work together is because the web these days has become transparent. The audience you're targeting is very much the same that a large corporation would target, depending on what you do, of course. And what search is looking for is the same in every website. So essentially, there are three things that any search engine is looking for in a website. It's looking for expertise, it's looking for authority, and it's looking for trustworthiness. Depending on the industry you're in, these three things, the way these three things are expressed, are going to be different, and they're going to be different steps entailed in actually achieving them. But if we think of the single individual or a very small team working on a website which perhaps they haven't got a lot of technical control over, all they can really control is the content that they actually put there. And here, that content is critical because it plays a critical role. It establishes a little bit of their voice and a lot of their identity and a lot of their personality. And it's the first contact point they have with someone who accesses that content online. So really, the traditional thinking of, hey, we do this and we need to have these keywords because we need to sell those houses in those areas, which means we need to have some content which contain those keywords. That kind of thinking really has to go out the window. because that's the thinking of the past. So yes, keywords to a certain extent are going to be important, but what is really important is the kind of information which the person looking for that type of information, that type of question, using perhaps those keywords, or not even using those keywords, because with semantic search, it's the subject and the topic that are important as opposed to keywords, is going to find useful. So really, you need to sit down and think, okay, I need to put some content on the web. That need hasn't gone away, but now that content really needs to resonate with your audience. So don't think, oh, I need 300 words and I need the postcode to be mentioned 4 times and the area and perhaps something about it. Really ask yourself, what does the audience really need to know? Do they need to know very specific things? If they do, make sure they're there. Make sure those things are broken down in steps and chunks that can really understand and digest and go away feeling that they've actually spoken to an expert. Make sure that what you do is, in terms of the content, is very clear in its intent. Don't fudge it. Don't dress it up. Don't create so much content and fluff around it that it's difficult to extract the meaning. And then also mention if you can, your own expertise in it, your own authority. Where does this information come from? What other impact points there are linked perhaps to other articles you have written or other pages which help expand the picture and add greater depth. And it's through that approach that you achieve these 3 things. You establish essentially your expertise, you establish the level of authority, and you establish your trustworthiness, and you do it in a very human way. So you're talking to the audience pretty much the same way that you would, if you're a real estate agent and you meet somebody down the pub. Well, you're not giving your card and say, hey, I've got houses to sell, do you want to buy them? Because that's not going to work. But if the conversation brings it around to houses, then what you would say would suggest that your knowledge and experience and skill set is decidedly different than those people around you who are not real estate agents. And that suddenly makes you, in the eyes of the audience and in their minds, the expert in the group, without you having to whip out your card and saying, hey, I'm a real estate agent. That comes a little bit later. So really, that's the approach that you need to take now with your website, which means you've got to ask very human questions about your audience, and then you have, in a very human way, work hard to answer those questions in the content that you actually put on your website. And if you do that, then you begin to establish the kind of presence on the web that will begin to also rank you high in search.
I have to admit, I kind of made a rookie mistake here. I forgot to really even ask you about yourself. I was so anxious and excited to listen to you talk. I jumped right into it. But I think this might be a good segue. Speaking of expertise and authority, how did you become the authority in Google search, David? I mean, you're so knowledgeable in all of this, and you're doing it just quite easily right off the top of your head, and you're very comfortable with it. How'd you get into all of this? Yeah, you seem so knowledgeable.
Well, I've been working on search on the web since 1995, since pretty much the web came along. And at the time, I was in corporate journalism, and before that, I was actually a journalist reporting on technological advances across Europe. So I was always sort of fairly clued up in terms of what's happening in technology. So part of my role as a corporate journalist was being part of the internal communications team for a large UK department store. At the time, they had 250,000 staff and 28 branches across the country. And my role was to be part of the team that basically took that company into the 21st century through a number of online sort of activities and initiatives, including search. So I pretty much had to learn in practice what I preached. I knew a lot of the theory, but I learned it in practice, and I've been active ever since, really. So when I sort of left that corporate world, I went into SEO, running a team at a web company. And then from that, I sort of went into writing books about it. And since then, I've been talking and guiding large corporations across the globe in terms of their different market needs. And it's quite fascinating because it gives me access to different types of data sets of how search works, for instance, on the Asian side, where They are leapfrogging us in many ways in terms of how they adapt to the technology, but as a market, they're still at a very psychologically new stage, and they're making some of the rookie mistakes of the past, and also they're developing different kind of mentalities and modalities of how they approach this. So this is what I do now. So it gives me the kind of spherical view, and I'm just quite lucky in the way sort of things worked out.
Yeah, and I feel very lucky myself to know you. So let's just see if we can just maybe do a brief summary of kind of like what you just explained. Now, kind of what I was gathering was it's not so much with respect to, like you said, although to a certain extent it is important the keywords on the website, but really let's just say a real estate agent, if they're trying to get in the good graces of Google and amplify their online presence, that they should really focus on producing content and putting that out there on the internet. That way they can establish expertise and authority and get Google to trust them. For example, maybe a little PDF document about the school system in their market. Something that is really helpful, really informative. And then Google would ultimately say, wow, Chris Tracy is a real estate in this, he's an agent in this particular market. And so Google would see that I'm the author of that I wrote an article as a real estate agent about a school system, about how I can help people that are looking to buy a house. So then Google says, wow, I might actually facilitate people going to his website. He appears to be trustworthy. People like this content that he's putting out there. They're sharing it on social media. People are, positively commenting on it. They find it helpful. I'm just curious as to how kind of Google is the judge and jury of all of this. I guess I probably answered my own question, where if people share it on social media, people like it on Facebook, things of that nature, or if people are clicking on the links, then if it's connected to your website, Google would say, all right, well, this Chris Tracy guy, this real estate agent, he's really putting out a lot of helpful and informative tools and resources for the general public. It appears that he's trustworthy and he's an expert in real estate. Let's take his website and let's put it in, I don't know, the third spot on page 1, because spot 1 and 2 are taken by Realtor.com and Wikipedia or something like that. I don't know. So is that what you're kind of recommending, David? Am I hearing that correctly? Where agents shouldn't get so, or small business owners or people that have their own website, they're trying to SEO their own web page. They shouldn't get caught up in the IT part of it, the web development part of it, the technical stuff of their website, but actually focus more on investing time into publishing content for their customers and clients, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And you also answered your own question. Well, let's actually let's look at this, because you do ask something which is very logical. How can essentially what are strings of code assess the quality and expertise and the authority of something which is supposed to resonate at a human level, which is the content of a website read by an online visitor. And here's how it works. Before we got to semantic search, we had a web of websites, and the websites basically were key in terms that they said what they said, and we had to take that on faith. There was nothing else to do. And there were certain sort of checks and balances which could apply, but ultimately, there's a leap of faith. And it doesn't work quite that way anymore. And certainly, in the offline world, it has never worked that way anymore. If you tell me that you're an expert on something, well, I think maybe you are, maybe you're not, but I'm going to do my own due diligence, do a few searches, ask a few people, and depending on what they say, I will actually decide whether to trust you or not. Now, there are two things here involved: trust and reputation, and there's a hard definition for both. Now, trust essentially is what is required for any kind of a relational exchange to take place. And when we talk about a relational exchange, it can be anything, whether it is accepting a piece of information because you read it on a website, or actually deciding to do a transactional business with somebody and give them money in exchange for something else. If there's no trust, this will not happen. Reputation is what you need in order for someone to be willing to do business with you if they have never met you before. That's the hard definition of reputation. And again, that is engineered or manufactured or created through a lot of effort and time and people talking about you who don't really know you directly, but they know what you do and they have faith in the expected result. Now, trust itself is created through a four-step process, and that four-step process is contact, perception, assessment, and connection. And essentially, that works whether the content or the contact is an ad or it is a website and a web page. The first initial contact is what's happening there. There's a perception element which has to be met, and if it's not met, it's a barrier. And then there's an assessment stage where the person reading all that or talking to you, if it's a face-to-face kind of situation, assesses whether they think that what you say holds water, it is logical, it has a kind of ring of truth, which we are accustomed to judging. And finally, if you pass those three, you get to the connection where the barriers are lowered, the person is then willing to give you their trust and do business with you or listen to you or give you their attention. Now, these are the things which happen in the semantic web. And Google has very clever allow the establishment and the assessment of trust at an algorithmic level. And the way they do it is that instead of looking at a website, they instead look at the website and then look at the social web and then look at citations and then look at social activity and then they look at the sentiment surrounding that social activity and then they begin to establish a certain score which then reflects on the website itself. So if you have a website and you say, I'm the greatest at what I do, because you say so, you're not going to say you're not, well, that's not enough. But if you have a website that says, I'm the greatest at what I do, and then that is that's echoed or resonates with the social media audience, people on Facebook say the same thing or pretty much the same thing, people on Twitter are raving about your services, people on Google Plus are saying that you're great and they're sharing your content. All those are corroborative signals, which then Google uses in order to establish that credibility score, they need a trustworthiness in your website, which then begins to reflect in terms of ranking in search. I'm simplifying it grossly here, it's quite complicated, but essentially that is the essence of it. Because it's so complicated, it becomes very difficult to game, because now the economics of gaming, which mean that essentially you're applying a shortcut which will give you a greater return when compared to the effort involved, are non-existent. So because you can't game it anymore, you may as well do the right thing all the time. And that's why it's so difficult to game search now, because there's nothing to be gained by trying to do that. You may as well do exactly what you have to do in order to establish your authority and expertise.
Right. All right. So let's pretend for a second, David. Let's pretend that you're a real estate agent, or you're just a small business owner, and what's the very first thing that you would do to your website? Let's just say you just got a website, any old website. Let's just say you don't have a big team, you don't have a big budget. You're just a small operation. Or should you not even really focus on that and then go a different direction and just say, okay, well, maybe I'll write an article. And that article will contain, the most helpful information I can possibly think of, and then ultimately just try to get people to share that and like it on social media, which will kind of indirectly enhance your SEO because, well, like you said, the social media, it appears, is really kind of weighing in more heavily than just, okay, I have a website, I'm going to go on it, and then I'm going to, see how I can kind of enhance it, or, well, again, that's like the old ways, I know, like we said earlier, but I guess step one, you would just say, okay, I'm just going to make a brochure website. I'll leave it there, so if people want to find me on the internet, or I can just direct them to some place they can read about me, and then focus a lot of your time and energies perhaps on just making good content and then just trying to get people to embrace it on social media. That way, ultimately, it all kind of funnels back to you at the end in your website.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, and it sounds paradoxical almost. If you really want to get anywhere, It doesn't matter what size team you have. It doesn't matter what resources you have to throw at it. Essentially, what you need to try and do is to do away with yourself. So in terms of the content that you create online, and this is a direct break from the past. In the past, we used to say, hey, here's what we do to debate, and then you had an action call. Somebody had to call you so they can give them the rest of it, right? But the world doesn't work that way anymore. People are not willing to take that risk because there's an inherent risk in a kind of transaction because you're an unknown quantity. So in order for that risk to be lowered or to go away completely, you have to transition from being an unknown quantity to being a known quantity, which means that essentially they need to know how good you are. In order for you to show how good you are really at what you do, you need to be able to tell them. You need to say, hey, if you're thinking of buying a house, for instance, there are specific steps you need to have in mind. There's a typical one about location, 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 but how do you decide if a location is really the location that you're looking for? Because if you don't know the area, for instance, what are the signs that you really should be looking for if you walk through it or if you drive through it? Well, if you answer that conclusively for a particular area, then essentially almost you're doing away from your services as a real estate agent. But at the same time, you're also showcasing your depth of expertise and your willingness to actually give information that has real value. And that establishes trust because if I'm thinking of moving in a particular area and I don't know anything about it, I'm thinking, how do I know if the area is good? And I come across an article which tells me, hey, if you're thinking of living in Houston, Texas, and you're thinking of buying a house there, these are the 4 things you need to look for. And if you look at those 4 things, this is what each one means, and this is what you have to have in mind, and this is what's happened historically, and these are the reasons why you need to consider this. And immediately that real estate agent rises to my mind top above anybody else. And that's a human reaction. And paradoxically, again, this is also how the algorithm assesses it, because it looks to see how people react to that. I would probably tweet that because I'd be quite excited. I'd pass it on to my friends. And even if they're not really looking to buy a house in that particular area, kind of expertise, that kind of giving away trade secrets within inverted commas, if you like, actually excites people because it allows them to learn something. So that generates a kind of buzz which then reflects back on you algorithmically first in terms of search, but also at a human level. And that's a win on 2 fronts because you win at a personal level, you establish trust and your expertise with a human audience first, and then you also do that with a search engine.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense, and we see it a lot on the internet, and a lot of people do that where they just put the helpful articles out, the content, and the whole seems to be a big transition with. You see a lot of people making YouTube videos, or they just submit articles to directories, like the top 10 tips for this, or life hacks, or whatever, make your life easier when you're cooking, or things of that nature. I think what I've been trying to get is some tangible step-by-step action item where, like, as soon as someone hangs up this call, they can just go and do it, but it's maybe not that simple, not that straightforward, like kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, let's start with that. Suppose you're a new real estate agent, you just got a website, you're thinking, okay, I'm ready to start to open for business. What's my next step? The next step really is nothing to do with the web. You really need to clarify in your mind, who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing, and why should anyone do business with you? These are 3 simple questions. But if you answer them conclusively, suddenly you have your unique selling proposition. Because if you try to be a real estate agent like any other real estate agent, well, there's no reason for me to pick you because I can pick any real estate agent. I don't need you. So you need to establish those 3 things in your mind. And the moment you establish those 3 things in your mind, then they begin to inform everything you do. They begin to seep through in the way you connect with your customers. They seep through into the content which you put in your website. They begin to inform the way you interact and engage the web and in social media and everything else. So that's how you start off. You start off with those 3 questions. You clarify your identity. You say, okay, this is exactly why I'm going to be different. This is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly why I'm in business. And then you think, how can I then transform, communicate these values in everything I do? And that's a difficult bit, right? Because it's, although you clarify it in your head, it's fairly introspective, then it has to come across. It has to come across in the way your website is structured. It has to come across in the way your messages are structured. It has to come across in the way your information is given. And also, if you have time to spend in social media interaction, whether you engage in Twitter or Facebook or certainly Google+, it has to come across through these things. And that's the critical thinking which you need to do.
Right. That's good. That would be a good segue into one of these other questions I was going to ask you is what are the biggest challenges with doing all of this? And I think that I even struggle with that on my, personally, is sometimes like your average person, if they have, they have a family, they have kids, some people just do real estate on the side because they have a full-time job. And then, they like to do other things. They like to have a personal life, a social life, go out, enjoy themselves. And it seems like your average person is so stressed nowadays where they just can't get out of their own way, and they just can't sit down and do what you just said, and just focus and just get some clarity on the topic. So the biggest challenge, I guess, probably would you say is probably just a person getting out of their own way and just thinking about it, and then getting it in their mind, and then deploying it.
Yeah. Now, funnily enough, the question of time and cost is endemic right across the world. I hear the same complaints from large marketing teams, who have 15 plus people and a team leader and a marketing budget of $500,000 a year. And they tell me, well, we haven't got enough time, we haven't got enough people, we haven't got enough money. And then I hear the same complaint, somebody working on their own, and he says, I haven't got enough time, I'm only one person, and I haven't got enough money to do everything I want. When the same complaint is voiced by everybody, it means that the challenges are the same and the scale is different. And that's also different in the world because suddenly we're all swimming in the same pond. It used to be fairly fragmented and fairly segmented, and our audience was contained in containers. All we had to do was reach deep enough into that container and pull them out. And now suddenly we're all on a great big sea, fighting, with inverted commas, for the same audience, fighting for their attention. The only way we can do it is by being very real, very authentic, very human, because that's what actually sticks to mind, and by developing the kind of relationships which then allow us to work progressively from there. Offline, we do that anyway. Despite all the challenges which we face in the offline world, the only way to move forward is by clarifying in our minds who we are and why we do things. And if we don't have that kind of clarity, well, we face huge problems in who we are and why we do things, in our career choices and our life choices and everything else. That clarity has to happen. And the moment it happens, it has to happen offline primarily, but the moment it happens, then it begins to inform everything. So that's what needs to be addressed. And I accept it is not an easy thing to do, whether you're a large corporation or a person. I mean, I would argue that a large corporation has more difficulties in trying to get this because there are more personalities involved. There are huge egos sometimes at play. And there's always a turf war that goes with any kind of corporate environment. A single person or a smaller team have an easier time. It's just that their perception of it is they feel that they're wearing too many hats. They're too stressed for time and they can't really allocate the time necessary in order to do a particular job. Well, they need to basically find the time to do that because it is critical. If you need to move forward, if you really want to move forward, you have to clarify who you are and how you're going to do this.
Right. So I guess that would be the biggest mistake people make, you would say, is they're just unclear with respect to their mission statement and their vision and moving forward.
Yeah. We get mission statements. Okay, what do we hear every time? I mean, I can practically write everybody's mission statement. You have to have something about exemplary customer service because you're not going to say, hey, I'm going to give you pretty poor customer service. Great set of values because you're going to say, I'm going to take your money and run. And something about integrity because obviously you're not going to say, hey, I'm a crook. It's funny, but Enron had a very similar mission statement, and we know how that went. Really, it's not about what you say because that's the expected thing. It's actually what you do. And in order to do that every time, it has to be clear in your head. You really need to know who you are and what you're doing. You need to know where you draw the line. So that's why we come back to the critical thing. So yes, indeed, the mistake that everybody makes is thinking, oh, this is what I need to have and checking the box and moving away from it. And no, it isn't anymore. If you clarify who you are, you haven't checked the box. It's a struggle to establish that in every contact you have. So if you think, for instance, you're going to say, hey, I'm going to be the real estate guy who will save my customers time and money every time, even if it costs me a little bit on commission, which is, the kind of thing that somebody might say. Then you need to work really hard to establish that in everything you say, in everything you do, in the way you act, in the way you follow up with customer service, in the way you develop your services, in the way you develop your business relationships, and it has to come across in everything. And if your actions speak for themselves in that way, then that's it. That's how you establish the kind of reputation which will bring in more business, and you establish the kind of buzz around your name, which creates a kind of amplification of your signal, and suddenly you get the whole world working for you without you having to work very hard every time. If you go the traditional way, then you're fighting hard to gain customers, and that fight never stops because each customer is individual, independent. They never really amplify anything because they haven't really connected with you. They're disposable almost, and so are you. So then that fight is a lossy one. It's where we were in the 20th century. In the semantic web, things are transparent, things work incrementally, and they accumulate. And you really need to have that in mind as you move forward.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but or as far as like pitfalls that people should avoid with trying to amplify their online presence, like you said, it has to happen incrementally over time because people want to be on page one like next week for their business. And I guess it's not like you can go in, push a couple of buttons, create a couple of links, connect a couple of things, create a website, and there you go. Google loves you all of a sudden. It just takes time. It just takes time and effort and just consistent, diligent work to gain the love of your market pretty much and your customers and get a loyal following, on the internet. So is that safe to say as far as kind of like some of these mistakes that people are making? What would you say? What would you say that the pitfalls that people fall into? What should they avoid with all this? Just that instant gratification pitfall that we all succumb to. Would you say that that's probably the biggest one?
Yeah, well, right up to the end of the 20th century, we had push button everything because everything scaled, and the digital came along. Digital suddenly gave us a one-to-many channel in terms of broadcasting, and we thought, hey, this is really cool. And all the tools we had up to that time pretty much did the same thing. And they got us used to this kind of broadcast mode that allows us to do things easily without a lot of effort. And it hasn't really worked. I mean, we're in a stage now where we can see that irrespective of the size of the company or the organization, you simply haven't got enough money to market yourself adequately in order to make enough money to live. And that goes for everybody. So suddenly you have to do more with less. The only way you can do that is if every person that comes across you becomes so convinced of the values you stand for, the person you are, the way you operate, that they go away singing your praises. So suddenly the effort involved in a single relationship is worth it because it becomes an amplification point. And every relationship, if you do enough of them each day, then every month becomes easier and easier, and your working life and arguably your personal life becomes a lot easier. That's the way to move forward. And the pitfalls are the old mentality of the past, where we expect things to work easily and instantly because it's digital. We have a website, we get it up on Google, in 10 days' time, it'll be on the first page of Google. But it's not going to happen anymore. You're in business, you think, okay, all I need now is to buy a newsletter, send off a mailing list, and I'll convert 0.01% of 50,000 people. Well, again, that's not going to happen anymore because everybody used to think like that. And the 50,000 people you send your newsletter to have so little attention to actually give you that even if you get past all the spam filters and all the filters that they've put in place to avoid having contact with you, when you get there and they see you, they won't give you their attention. The only way they'll do it is if you actually resonate with them at a very human level. So the mistakes of the past have to do with traditional marketing practices. And I would say in the new world, stop marketing. Don't market in the traditional sense. Be yourself. Explain who you are. Connect with people as a person. It doesn't matter if it's a business, you're one person, or you're a multinational with 35,000 employees active in 17 countries. Those businesses are struggling to become A person is struggling to find an identity and connect with their audience at a personal level, because at the faceless business level, it doesn't work anymore. So you have an advantage over these kind of businesses, because for you it is arguably, as a small team or as one individual, it is easier to establish that. So work on that.
Oh, I got a great story I'd love to add, David. I hope do we still have a little bit more time for me to tell this because
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
it's quite relevant. I went to a I went to a real estate seminar last week, and so I was in a room full of real estate agents, and they had past clients that were up on the stage, providing their insights and their experiences, because these people, they just bought or sold a house. So all the real estate agents went there because they want to know what clients and customers are thinking so that they can tap into this knowledge, you know. So I signed up for it, and whoever was running it, they called me yesterday, and they said, "Hi, Mr. Tracy. Yeah, just following up, and yeah, I notice here that." Or she said, "Oh, you attended our seminar, you know, on real estate clients last week. I can't remember the exact name of it, but the woman said to me, I kid you not, she goes, yes, and I see here that you forgot to give us your email address. Yeah, so if you could just call me back, and if we could have that, that would be great. I mean, that's not verbatim, but that's pretty much, that was the context of the conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, did I just hear that correctly? Is this lady serious? Why on God's green earth, what motivation or incentive do I have to call this person back, stop what I'm doing, give them my email address, which I deliberately omitted from that piece of paper that I signed, just so they can inundate me with stuff in my inbox that's already saturated with, like you said, I'll just wind up on someone else's list. And talking about resonating on the human level, that woman, I wanted to call her back just to tell her that she really needed a lesson, like a sales lesson 101. That was probably the most invaluable interaction with a human being, even though I didn't talk to her, that I've ever had. And I just wanted to kind of make some type of I was almost going to do a separate YouTube video on that, which teaches people, listen, if you're trying to get people's email addresses, you have to give them something valuable in exchange. I was laughing for like an hour afterwards, David. I kid you not. And I'm like, some people out there are just still clueless, especially with email marketing nowadays. The email, I mean, I spent probably a half an hour just the other day just kind of just unsubscribing from all these different marketers that send me stuff. And again, it's a trust thing, you know, where your average person is just like, leave me alone. It's like, I mean, to walk around as a human being in this society, it's just like you're bombarded with marketing messages and someone trying to sell you something. I'm just, yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in there really quick. It's kind of a little side note thing there.
It's absolutely relevant. You're right, what you said, and your experience is key to this. I mean, essentially, all that happened is they gave you a very strong signal that they saw you as a number, not even a person. So all they had, you know, they commanded you more or less to ring them back, give me your email address, so they can spam your inbox. And you know, the moment you establish a kind of credentials, you lose trust immediately. And not only that, but you know, here's what happened: they actually riled you. You spent more time and effort thinking about them, and you know, at the first opportunity, you would say, "Hey, you know, don't do business with them because you know they're ridiculous. They don't have a clue." And that's exactly the kind of approach that we can actually inverse. You know, suppose they had contacted you at a very personal level and said, hey, you know, you were there, great, and you know, we valued you, and here's what we're doing. We get together, you know, 10 of the industry experts every month, and we ask them difficult questions, and we send those answers directly to people who are interested. Are you interested? And if you said yes, they'll say, great, you know, can we have your email? And then you would think, what great people. They make my life a little bit easier because they work harder to generate value for me, and you would have willingly given them your email and perhaps even suggested to your friends to subscribe to their email service. And it's exactly that kind of mental shift. You know, if you're in the 20th century, the century that we left behind, then you are marketing at a faceless, one-to-many, corporate speak, sort of non-human way, and that really annoys people. It makes the barriers go up. It makes the trust levels go down, and people are disinclined to do any kind of business with you at all, never mind giving you their attention and time. And that's what we're trying to inverse. We're in a very human century. We're talking about human-to-human business. Large corporations are trying very hard to become people in terms of their character and their voice and their set of values. They're trying to reach us at a very human level now because their traditional marketing doesn't work. As individuals or as small businesses, we actually have a huge advantage in this sphere in that we can actually do it a lot faster, a lot better, and we can connect with people at a much easier level than a large corporation. There's still a tendency sometimes to think that if you speak in a corporate way, if you have a very faceless website, you tend to be professional and people will trust you. And I would say that this is something you really need to change in your way of thinking, because it's not happening. People really need to see the person behind the website. They need to understand who is there, why they're working, why they're doing what they're doing, and why then the person you're targeting, within inverted commas again, should actually connect with you and do business with you.
Right, absolutely. David, so we spoke about previous ways of doing things in the history. Where do you see the future of all of this going? Like what's coming down the pike with respect to Google? Because I know that we're pretty well established now in the digital age, and now the majority of people, it's pretty safe to say that they have some type of mobile device. And I know you speak about that in your book as well, that the mobile is important with respect to Google and search. What do you see the future of Google and semantic search?
Well, what we're seeing right now is that mobile is almost a tipping point of being more than 50% of the traffic that any kind of website gets. We have got, I think, 2 billion people out of 7 online. And the next 5 billion people are arguably the majority of them are going to get online with their first experience of the web being either a phone or a tablet. It's not going to be a computer. And this changes everything. In many ways, the medium affects the way the message is seen and the way the message is received. It's worth bearing in mind that when it comes to search in particular, the moment we get on a mobile device, it is purely semantic. Voice search works from a semantic index, which essentially means that the principles of expertise, authority, and trustworthiness in what you do online are totally critical in terms of visibility. So the way that things are transitioning, we probably 5 or 6 years from now, we're going to have trust agents on the web, which are personal digital assistants. We already have seen them in effect. We've got Siri, which is the Apple personal assistant, Google Now, which is what Google has, and Cortana, which is what Microsoft is developing. And we're going to see them being active more and more across the web. We'll be able to essentially charge them with tasks to do, order them to do things for us, and they will do some things proactively and predictively for us. And key to all of this is really, in order for somebody to show up in that kind of environment, in order for somebody to be successful in business in that kind of context, you really need to be exactly who you say you are. You need to have that kind of relationship with your public. You need to have an audience which is not just an audience which you have bought off a mailing list, but it's your audience. It's the people who choose to listen to you. They're people who choose to amplify your message. They're the people who choose to engage with your content, even if they're not your direct customers. And the reason they choose to do that is because they believe in you. And if we take, for instance, somebody who works locally and say he's a real estate agent, he has a very limited radius in terms of reach, and he'll say, okay, this is great, but what you're saying is applicable globally. Why should I even consider that? Well, here's how it works. You find your audience globally, essentially, because what you do resonates with people across the globe at a very human level, and they amplify your message, and you find then your customers locally, because your message has been amplified to the extent that a lot of people see it and eventually filters down to your customers. So really, that's how it works across the globe. And the phrase now that the web is global, but it works local, has never been more relevant than ever. It's exactly where we're heading.
Awesome. So, I guess those could be used. I was going to ask you if you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share. Perhaps maybe one action item that a person can take as soon as they're done watching this video. Because if we don't tell them what to do, they're going to go and watch television, or they'll just,
Yes.
they'll probably just aimlessly scroll around on Facebook. Or what should a person do to get started, like as soon as they're done watching this video?
Well, I would say, in one word, something which is really challenging: be authentic. And the moment you hear that, you think, okay, how can I ever be that when the web is impersonal? We're all behind screens, and everybody just reads websites and pages and content. Well, be authentic by actually writing down the values which you want to stand for, the values you want to be recognized for, and they'll become part of your mission statement as you progress, which is always a living document. So if you just go away from the video, just sit down and think, what is it you stand for? What is it you actually want to do? What is it you believe for? What is it that you want to accomplish? Beyond just making money, because we all want to do that, and we all need to do that in order to survive. So that's not really a goal. And if you do that right, if you find out what it is that makes you tick at that level, then the making money part will become a lot easier, and it'll be a byproduct.
Right. And then assuming if it's like, okay, I want to be a really good real estate agent, I want to be the best real estate agent in my town, then once someone has that clear in their mind, their passion, then they say, okay, well, maybe they should just create some content and share it, right? So they can start to build up that allegiance of their,
Yes. In
yeah.
terms of that content creating plan, here's the thing, and it's a very valid point you bring up. Suddenly we're forced to be cinematographers and videographers and writers and photographers, when at the end of the day you only signed up to be a real estate agent. And there's a question of whether you need to do all that, and also there's a doubt in whether you're good enough to write and photograph and create videos. And I'll say this. First of all, this is how we operate in this medium. You don't really have a lot of choice, but don't be so focused on the technical accomplishment of this as on the quality and value of the content you create. Ultimately, what people want to see, what they want to watch, or listen to is something which resonates with them at a value point and at a human level. They want to hear a person telling them something really important to them. And if you say that, it doesn't really matter how you do it, but it does matter that you actually do it, and that's what creates a connection. And always work from your strengths. If you're good at taking pictures, or you find taking pictures easier, start with that, and worry about the writing a little bit later. If you find writing a little bit easier than taking pictures, do that. If you think that the video will help you, certainly do this. So always work from your strengths and extend outwards, rather than trying to tackle the hardest thing first, which is then going to perhaps create a stumbling point.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much all that I have here today, David. And with all of that being said about valuable content, I think that was incredible insight that you just kind of shared with all of us. And again, I just wanted to kind of give a testimonial here about your book. I know that I flashed it up on the screen earlier, but it's called Google Semantic Search. And you can easily find it, I would imagine. I think I got it on Amazon. And other helpful things that you have, David, I would imagine other books coming out. Where can people go to find more of this really helpful and awesome information that you're providing here today?
You can find me on my website, which is davidamerland.com. I tend to write a lot of things there which come from the research I carry out, and they usually are of help. And you can connect with me on Google+. And if you ever send me a question, I usually reply to them. I receive way too many to reply immediately, but I do reply to all of them, even though it's a little bit of a backlog.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks a lot, David. I think that my viewers and listeners really kind of valued a lot of kind of like what you said. It was great. I think with much of this, probably with SEO, we tend to kind of, I know I fell into this trap, where many people probably they get overwhelmed and maybe they overthink things, and they say, okay, well, like I got to get backlinks, and I gotta go in there, and I gotta use this. There's this thing called anchor text that I've heard of before, and then that, and then ultimately they get paralyzed by analysis, and they do nothing, and then they do a little bit on social media here or there, but it really can be, if we just boil down everything that you explained, where you said, where just be a real person, just come from contribution, establish your expertise and your authority. You'll get people to trust you, and then ultimately Google will trust you, which ultimately makes more people trust you, and then the whole thing just grows, and it takes time. It's like, yeah. So I think that was awesome that you put all of the really mysterious things with respect to Google search. You put it into perspective nicely for people. I thought that you brought it down to earth really well, and I think that if people just kind of just do what you said and not think about it too much, and just move forward consistently, that it'll reap the benefits for them. Yeah, good stuff, David. I appreciate this. Thanks a lot for coming on here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, everybody, please go to David's website, check out all the stuff that he has. It's quite obvious that he's a wealth of knowledge with respect to Google and search engine optimization. So I stand behind him and his products. So I recommend that you definitely reach out to him on Google Plus and do business with him. All right, everybody, that's all for this module. Thanks a lot for watching. Please hit me up and let me know what you thought about it. I give David an A on his report card for today. I was thrilled having him here today, and I'm as soon as we're done with this call, I'm going to beg him to come back on again for another call about some other topics, because I absolutely loved it, and I'd like to stay here all afternoon and talk to him and just kind of ask him questions. And I'm sure that he's quite capable of speaking about search engine optimization for another 8 hours, I would imagine. But he probably has all kinds of things to do. So thank you very much, David. Thank you, everybody, for those watching this video or listening to it in your car or what have you. That's it for this module. Keep your eyes open for potentially another episode with David, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.